Okay, so declaration of interest, just this is showing up more and more in talks, so I don't think I have any conflicts of interest, but these are where I get my funding. So we have a problem, as you all know, everyone here, I'm speaking to the converted, so one of the first problems is the waste, and I think Doug Altman and others have brought attention to this problem, and we really can't forget about the waste. I think one of the ways that we ended up winning the argument about registration of trials was the ethics of enrolling patients in studies and yet not showing the data, the knowledge that was gained to the public. And I think also the waste is almost a better argument than the science. It's something people really understand. Another problem is we aren't doing what we should be doing, our covenant with the world about science passing on knowledge. And for us, there's just too many places to look for information. I find that already, and you know, I sort of feel like throwing up my hands, and it shouldn't be like that. So one of the big problems is that, and it's also something we do on purpose, is that rather than provide access to the information directly, we're providing access to distilled information. And there are advantages to providing access to distilled information, that's publications, but that means we're keeping the real data hidden, just as Stuart mentioned with the statistical analysis, and I have something to add to that, but you'll see in a minute. And then finally, what we need, and we're talking a lot about open data, what we need is open science, as many people have acknowledged, not just open data. And that's sort of the thrust of what I'm going to be talking about, which is, it may seem like I'm down in the weeds a little bit, but I don't think we're going to get to open science just by making our data open. So this is just where we're going for trial information and some of the work that we're doing. It's way too many places. There are short reports, you know, like conference abstracts, journal articles, unpublished manuscripts that are out there, information that's on trial registries, individual patient data, then we go to registration, the protocol, the statistical analysis plan, just way too many places, code books, et cetera. And there's a study from last year showing that the older studies are really hard to get hold of, that people have lost or thrown out the data, they don't remember them, and so the longer we wait, the less accessible this older data is. I'm not going to spend time on that, but I think that's something we have to consider. We're not just talking about today and tomorrow, we're talking about yesterday. Many of our drugs are based on studies that were done in the past, and now they're generic and they're still in a lot of use. So we're doing a study now with Evan Mayo Wilson is a colleague of mine and working closely on this, what we call MUDs, because it's really about MUD, which is multiple sources of data for doing systematic reviews. So we're taking 2 systematic reviews that gabapentin for neuropathic pain and quetiapine for bipolar depression. And then we're looking at all the various sources of data and seeing whether the meta-analysis would be any different in its findings. Like maybe the drug is useful, maybe it's not. Our prediction is, I don't know, but let's say there's no difference depending on what source you use. Well, that's good news in a way, but from what we've seen so far, there may be a difference in the adverse event reporting. Anyway, we're trying this out, and we're learning a lot along the way on the challenges that we're finding. First of all, the information's totally inconsistent across the sources. Many times you'll see abstracts used as a form of marketing, surprise, surprise, and we're also finding inconsistent information in a single clinical study report. That's the internal report that the drug company makes of its data, and often thought to be the best single source of information, of aggregated data about a trial. So even there, we're finding a lot of inconsistencies. We've also found that even though many manufacturers have promised to share data in public and on their websites, they don't. And Evan Mayo Wilson published a paper last month in BMJ showing just our sequence of events with AstraZeneca trying to get the data. And they have said they're willing to share their data. So obviously something's the matter. Oh, we forgot. Would you send the protocol? We send the protocol. Oh, we forgot. Would you send this? We send this, et cetera. And finally, the no. But the most interesting thing is the individual patient data that I'm sure we'll be talking a lot about. And in each case, we've obtained that through litigation. has been problematic. It came with no metadata, so there was no code book, no way of really telling what the individual patient data were, and there were all different data structures we had to figure out. We've been able to figure out almost everything, luckily, because we have experience in clinical trials and what these data sets look like, and the data sets were pretty well done. But they do, especially with adverse events, rely on old, out-of-date data structures and coding and different coding systems for the adverse events, so that's been interesting. But what's really interesting, and this is apropos what Stuart just said, is we can't replicate the analyses that they said they did. We can't come up with the same answers. It's very interesting, and I would predict that a lot of the analyses they don't want to share is how they dealt with missing data. So they may have said that they used last observation carried forward or some such method, but we've been unable to replicate what they said they did. So this is kind of scary because IPD have been thought to be our answer, and if we can't replicate the analyses that show up in the CSRs, theoretically the best source of information, then something's going on we don't know about. So what are the challenges that we're finding with open data? And this will lead to my recommendations. First of all, they're technological factors. You know, there are trials all over the place. Stuart talked about drug company trials. What about academics and the way they do trials? And that's a real challenge. The methods aren't standardized. The metadata aren't standardized. Data elements aren't standardized. I could go on and on about this lack of standardization and the kinds of problems we're all going to face if we really get the open data part of this solved. So the data analyses aren't reproducible, and then there's human nature. I mean, human nature is a huge part of this, setting up a reward system and a willingness to share. So, and then our siloing, just that we all work in these silos, even within this room, they're siloing, and I think it prevents us from sharing openly. So what are my recommendations? First of all, decide on what our community standards. What's our community? Who decides? Who decides the standards? What do we have in place, and what do we still need? So we have some things we're really doing very well in terms of systematic reviews and meta-analysis, not so well on some of the other things. And what do other communities do? Do we know what other communities do? We don't, I'd say, and they're doing a lot. It's amazing. I just came from a conference of farmers, and it's amazing what they're doing. So we also have some things that we can bank on that'll really make a difference in our arguments. Article 15 for the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights says that science, let's see if I can do this, we should, to enjoy the benefits of scientific progress and applications, this is our right to benefit from the protection of moral and material interests resulting from any scientific endeavor, etc. So we have these rights to have good science, and I think we have to use these when we have arguments, for example, about FDA requirements. We have to define metadata. I don't think we've defined it at all. What do we actually want? What are we saying? We're calling it metadata. Other fields have really defined metadata quite well, and they even have sources like Morpho that I'm showing here for making a format for your metadata so that it can conform to what the community decides is needed. We also, this is something really important, need to require data management plans. And NIH has them for studies more than $500,000. NSF requires it for its studies. We need to require across the board at academia as well. See if we can get the deans to go along with it. See if we can get journals to go along with it. We need a data management plan because data collection and management is really going to have an effect on whether the open data are useful to the rest of us. So we'll need to decide the formats. There are data management formats that are available online, and we could go and ask people to please use one of those. NIH should probably extend this way beyond the $500,000 mark and so forth. So the way forward are these three recommendations that I have, and I hope we get a chance to talk about them. Thank you.